Well, hello, everyone. My name is Tom Johnson, and I'm the director of the EOGOGIX Web Live programs. Having been involved in computer-based training in one form or another for more than 25 years now, it's my pleasure to welcome each of you to this Web Live session. For those of you who may be new to EOGOGIX, I'll refer you to the About EOGOGIX page on our website. Suffice to say that the EOGOGIX team, led by KK Aurora, has been involved with many landmark telecom projects worldwide during the past 20 years or so. In fact, I think KK is in the audience here somewhere. KK?
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, and welcome to the class.
Well, thank you, sir. And now let me take a minute to introduce our presenter today. Our presenter is Frank Ortman, who is a principal member of the EOGOGIX Telecommunications faculty. You can view his detailed bio online on the website, but I'd like to say just a few words by way of introduction. Frank teaches the EOGOGIX courses on 4G, WiMAX, Wi-Fi, SIP, and VoIP. He also provides consultation on RFP design and vendor selection to those involved in implementing broadband networks as part of the BTOP program that's included in the Economic Stimulus Act. Frank's teaching and consulting career builds on his 20-plus years experience in the telecommunications and electronics warfare areas. A firm believer in learning by doing, he even operated a small WiMAX network of his own for a while. I thought you might find that interesting. Frank has published several research reports and 4 books covering topics such as WiMAX, Wi-Fi, and Voice over IP, and the emerging all-IP architecture. And now, without further ado, Frank Ortman.
Yes, good morning, Tom, and welcome to WiMAX Explained, a presentation for all audiences. A quick note, intellectual property rights remain the property of EOGOGIX. Well, let's talk about WiMAX and defining WiMAX and telling us just what is WiMAX. Well, today we'll cover WiMAX defined. WiMAX, is it a 4G technology? And WiMAX technology and business factors, WiMAX in comparison to LTE, WiMAX players, the limitations of WiMAX, and 4G in the news as it relates to WiMAX. Well, what is WiMAX? WiMAX is an IEEE 802.16d and 16e standard. 802.16d is the fixed version ratified by the IEEE in 2004, and the mobile variant for WiMAX was ratified in 2005. To look at the performance parameters per the WiMAX Forum, a industry vendor group, WiMAX will deliver 72 megabits out to 30 miles in a point-to-point configuration line of sight. A non-line of sight point-to-multipoint configuration, WiMAX is capable of delivering 40 megabits of download out to 6 miles. Again, that is the performance parameters per the WiMAX Forum, and your mileage may vary. I want to emphasize that WiMAX is not Wi-Fi or Canopy. Wi-Fi was designed to cover the last 100 yards of a wireless network. That is, it'll cover a coffee shop, one floor of an office building, or your home. Throughput can range from 11 megabits up to 54 megabits, and now with the 802.11n being recently ratified, we might see some multiple of that 54 megabits, albeit all over the last 100 yards. WiMAX, on the other hand, was designed to be a quote-unquote last mile solution. The range of at least 6 miles be from a base station to a end user, although in my experience we get ranges out to 10 miles to provide adequate bandwidth. Throughput of 72 meg is listed earlier of a point-to-point 30-mile configuration, with multi-level encryption and multiple measures to ensure good quality of service to provide voice and video services in the last mile. Well, what is the significance of WiMAX on the current telecommunications market? Let's have a look as to WiMAX as one of two standards for 4G last mile. LTE, or long-term evolution, is the competitor. And more significantly in the news here in the U.S., the majority of broadband stimulus last mile grant loan applications, that is wireless grant loan applications, were WiMAX based. Out of almost 400 wireless applications, 307 were WiMAX applications requesting over $1.5 billion. Of note, that's almost double the number of fiber optic cable applications that requested twice as much money. So obviously we as taxpayers here in the U.S. get much more bang for the buck on a WiMAX network funded by the Stimulus Act than we would on a fiber application. Now there were a total of 1,130 last mile applications requesting $14 billion. I'll share with you some of my experiences in writing those grant applications totaling almost $30 million later in the presentation. Outside the U.S., there's almost 200 deployments and about 140 countries offering commercial WiMAX services. And here in the U.S., we find that WiMAX is the 4G last mile standard of choice for Clearwire and its partners Sprint, the number 3 cellular provider here in the U.S., and our number 1 cable TV company, Comcast. Now, is WiMAX 4G? Let's ask ourselves, well, what is 4G, fourth generation? Mostly it's a marketing term, not a standard with hard and fast numbers for performance. But very simply put, it's more bandwidth than what one will find on a 3G cellular network, considered to be a mobile application, mobile service. Smartphone users are craving this level of service, as we've seen recently in the news. It is an all IP or flat architecture, which means there's no circuit switch voice. It should be all voice over IP. As a result of that, this vague description of 4G, WiMAX certainly meets the description of 4G. Now, as I mentioned in the news recently, we're seeing a lot of dissatisfied smartphone users based on the services that they're getting from their provider, often resulting with dropped phone calls, downloads aren't as fast as the customer thinks they should be, which leads us to the question, are the devices here, that is 4G devices, are the 4G devices here, but perhaps the network is not? And the question we all have then is, well, what has to happen in order for smartphones to perform as, well, promised? And one question is WiMAX one of the solutions that will bring satisfaction to a smartphone user? Well, let's look at the architecture that currently supports smartphones. There's plenty of upgrades going out there. Billions of dollars are reportedly being spent to upgrade existing cellular networks to meet the demands of smartphone users. However, the last big build-out of the cellular networks was in the 1990s. Then the last, I'll call it a fleet of telephone switches to support those networks were deployed in the late 1990s. But since that time, we've seen the demise of telephone circuit switch vendors, namely Nortel going into bankruptcy and Lucent joining Alcatel in order to survive in a very tough market. The radio access network, aka the last mile in the cellular network, is entirely dependent on the public switch telephone network. That is, when you place a call on your smartphone, it first contacts the nearest cell tower, which in turn is dependent on the nearest telephone company central office to switch the call or to provide the online session. Also dependent there is the spectrum, the wireless spectrum on which your smartphone would connect to that cell tower. The last auction for that spectrum, in this case PCS spectrum, was in 1993. And that was an entirely different business model then than what we see today.